Hello and welcome to Microsoft 365 Backup Checklist for 2023. Today's webinar is sponsored by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech Media and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that will help you get the most out of this session. We want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in our webinar control panel. Not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we'll discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you have. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues. But if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. In the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering 3 resources, or actually several resources, but I'd especially like to call your attention to 3 links from Veeam. So there's a free trial of Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. There's a Gartner report on backing up Microsoft 365, and there's a technical guide to Microsoft 365 Backup. Again, 3 great resources. I highly encourage you to access those resources and share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, at the end of this webinar event, we will be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Finally, one of the best benefits of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. So to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. At the end of the event, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. So with all that out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic content. I am excited now to bring back 2 special guests from Veeam that we've had on Actual Tech Media webcasts before. We have Edward Watson, a senior product marketing manager, and Corinne Bissett, who's a global technologist for product strategy. They're both very knowledgeable presenters, and it's great to have them back. Edward, I'll turn things over to you to get us started.
Hey, it's a pleasure as always. Welcome, everyone. And if you're here, that means that you are interested in your 2023 planning, like many of us, and looking at possibly protecting your additional workloads. And Microsoft 365, we know, of course, is one of the most popular workloads, and we are seeing a rapid adoption of that. To recap, why are we doing this? Why are we protecting this data? Why is this so critical right here, right now? Well, this is some very fresh data that we have from ESG that clearly you can see there's a bit of a disconnect here in terms of the need for data protection. So the question was, in the past 12 months, has your organization experienced any data loss or corruption within any SaaS applications it uses? You could see that over half, 53%, had said yes. But most importantly, of that 53%, you can see on the columns on the right there, 59% of those did not have anything in place to protect or any safeguard to protect them and essentially recover that data. I really dread the outcome of those individuals on the right-hand side and that 59% left bar, because clearly there's a lot of thought and time that goes into really understanding why you need to back up and then implementing backup that we'll cover today. So with that, I think it's also important to note that cyber attacks are certainly on the rise. We did see in one research study that up to 80% of cyber attacks were targeting Office applications, 17% via email, 25% via phishing links, and a third of data on average is typically unrecoverable. So again, it's pretty clear, and I'm driving this home, but it's pretty clear that the need for backup, really of all our cloud workloads, is very, very necessary and essential today. So let's dive right into this checklist. Let's start with number 1 here, deployment flexibility. Why is that so important? So again, your backup should be able to be deployed not only on-prem, It should also be available to be deployed in the likes of the marketplaces. What if you want to deploy it maybe as a VM in Azure or AWS, or maybe you want to not manage it at all. Maybe you want to leverage backup as a service or a managed service provider. So really taking you through all of the different maybe life cycles, starting on-prem. If you want to move to the cloud, you can do that with many vendors in the market that actually won't allow that, but the likes of Veeam and a few others can actually help you regardless of what your deployment needs are. So Corinne, I know this is our first hearing of you of this presentation, but why don't you take us through the next step here in backup storage freedom? What does that look like for organizations? Why is that important?
Of course. So something you'll hear a lot through this entire presentation is really about the flexibility of your infrastructure, your deployment types, and choosing the things that make sense to your infrastructure. And it leads to the conversation of what is the best deployment type. And it's always a conversation, whatever makes best sense for your business. And what makes sense today may not make the same sense tomorrow. And that's what Veeam really does best, is we give you the flexibility to move between these options when they make the sense to your business. Now, not every backup vendor allows you this flexibility, especially when it comes to locked in storage vendors or any type of other SaaS providers out there. And starting with object storage here at the top of the list, object storage really gives you the best flexibility. Even when you're working with on-prem object storage, you can use that, migrate it up to the cloud, use some of the main cloud providers like AWS or Azure, IBM Cloud Storage, and some of the ones that you may not know, Object First and Wasabi, are also compatible. Anything that is S3 compatible is still an object storage that's supported by our brand. Then we have things like direct attached storage. If you have something that you have existing on your on-prem infrastructure and you don't have to worry about creating something new, working with the newer technology quite yet, you're welcome to use that. SAN is also an option. And if necessary, we do have SMB support. Granted, that's something that we don't quite recommend just because of the nature of SMB not quite being as communicative of a protocol to transfer that type of data. You may experience some interruptions as data gets transferred, and then you're not sure the consistency on that data on the other side, but that's due to the nature of that protocol used. And having the flexibility to move between these when the business changes is what we're able to offer. And the next thing we have here is about not just on-prem, but the hybrid approach.
Yeah, and we know that so many companies today are dealing with so many varied environments. Really having one solution that simplifies, whether it's on-prem, hybrid, whatever your environment is, having one single vendor, I think, also fits into this category. Because obviously the workload sprawl today, whether you have Kubernetes, virtual, physical, you want to be able to streamline that data protection. And of course, protect your hybrid environment, really streamline that protection, because you really ultimately don't know when some sort of event might trigger the need for a recovery or where that attack vector can actually start. We've seen a lot of instances where actually an attack can start on premises and then get synced with OneDrive and affect your Office M365 environment. So again, we're not dealing with just strictly Office 365 or strictly on-prem. We are dealing with those complex, multifaceted environments, and of course the attacks that happen within those that we need to make sure that we're mitigating those attacks where and when they happen. So definitely very, very important to take a hybrid approach, and not all vendors do that. So definitely make sure you're checking that box as well. Next up on the list, number 4, we've got control scope of backup. What does that mean, Corinne?
So controlling your scope of backup, really we need to take the point of what is scope. So scope is defining what objects are we taking into these backup cycles, and can we granularly define, is it the entire organization? Is it individual users, sites, and individual teams that matter? Inside of our product, we're able to granularly define whether or not it's a group, if it's individual teams, and then we could even exclude dynamically based off of Microsoft 365 groups, whether they're security groups, dynamically created groups, or manually created, such as in my lab, I have an exclude group that has dev accounts and accounts that I really don't have generated data in it that I want to keep for any extended period of time. And I don't want to bloat my backup file. So I automatically add it to all of my backup jobs so I don't have bloated backup files. And I can add that dynamically to all of my backup jobs. So having an inclusive and exclusive job creation, on top of that, being able to create multiple jobs, not just having one tier of class for your entire organization, but a C-level suite, a individual user suite, maybe one for your help desk, and then sending those off to individual repositories and being able to bill and scope different departments based off of their data usage, not just the entire organization again in that entire protocol. Next is about the backup solution in Teams.
Yeah, and you know, we've spoken about flexibility before, and certainly Teams is something that really has offered a lot of our teams flexibility. But unfortunately, there's a lot of misconceptions about Teams and about how Teams works on the back end. I'm sure that some of you on the call may actually know this because you're all very smart people. But of course, this acts as a back-end entity, right, to a lot of our applications on the back end, such as Exchange Online, SharePoint Online. If you think of team files, tabs, OneNote saved in SharePoint, and of course, OneDrive for Business, where the chat files reside. So ultimately, there's a significant amount of data sprawl, if you think about it, in terms of the Teams application. And ultimately, there's many backup solutions in the market that will protect the front end of Teams, but not the back end of Teams, right? So you really want to make sure you dig. You know, if a company says that they protect Microsoft Teams, make sure they're doing it with the latest APIs. Make sure that you're actually able to back up the Teams configurations. Make sure you're able to get restoration granularity and allow some efficiency in terms of your restorations as well, which is what that API really is great for. So definitely look into your team support specifically as you're evaluating backup vendors. And with that, I think that's kind of a nice tie into SLAs. Let's talk SLAs, Corinne.
So SLAs are important because you can talk about your options, your features, what you can include and not include in your backups pretty much all day long. But if you're not getting backups in a timely manner, you're not able to restore back to these environments in a timely manner. If you can't get your emails back to where you need them to be, then your backup solution is pretty much useless when it comes down to it. So making sure that these meet the recovery point objectives that you require within your organization, which means you're able to get backups from the source environment when you're able to get them in the increments that you're able to get them. Some backup solutions don't implement those newer APIs like we were talking about. And that means they're working off of legacy protocols. They may be working off of legacy authentication. And those don't work off of the newer ones, like the Teams API allows you to spin up multiple servers, meaning you're getting faster backups. Then you have to look at the recovery time objectives. I can't tell you how many times I've been out in the field and whether or not it's native solutions being used within the Microsoft 365 environment that were meant for like eDiscovery types of processes being repurposed to try to restore data, failing and taking costly time to try to get that data back versus using other types of solution, not getting that data back and just kind of trying to rebuild environments in that amount of time, not getting that data back to the end users cost the business just as much money in that. And now we have the next, what recovery options?
Yeah, so backup is one thing, but I would argue that recovery is almost more critical. What recovery options can I actually use, and you know, how can I get this data back in the form that I need based on my business requirement in that moment? So we know especially there's lots of different situations, compliance situations, maybe auditing situations where you may need capabilities beyond just restores. That's why the likes of Veeam, we have save, send, and export options. So regardless of the format you need, if you need to send to a user, if you need to send to HR or anything of that nature, really for any scenario, you want to make sure you look very carefully at all the restore options. That's why we lay them out on our Veeam website so clearly. There's a lot of vendors where there's a little bit of haze around, a little bit of uncertainty around all the restore options and their support around restores, because in all honesty, they can be limited. The likes of Veeam, we've always put an emphasis on restore options and made sure that you get the breadth and the depth that you need to restore however you need to. So as you're evaluating backup vendors, critical restores, make sure you have all the options your business requires. And next, we're looking at the discovery portion of this. Very important. Take it away, Corinne.
So restoration is important, but that doesn't really always satisfy when it comes to the compliance officer that sometimes walks into your door. We start talking about eDiscovery and advanced search. So being able to explore based off of different jobs is an important option. Maybe you have your jobs defined on what jobs and departments, so that helps you not have to pull up all of your backup files. So if you are working with, say, object storage, you don't have to pull back all of that data from all of your different object storage, which could be costly with ingress and egress fees with different companies. You can go based off a single organization. Say you are a campus of different schools. You may want to just pull back an individual school's version of data to be able to satisfy a compliance need. And then being able to search across all of your organizations. If you're falling into a larger court case, something to do with maybe intellectual property, this is something you'll likely need to do, is provide proof of certain type of terminology and search across all data entities involved within these backups across all organizations that you have ownership over, and making sure the tools that you have are able to search that easily without you really wanting to rip your hair out is very, very important. And scoping that down to the certain points in time. Sometimes it's not just about today or yesterday. Sometimes it's about what happened this day 6 years ago, what's different from that day to right now. And being able to have comparison tools between those different days can save you a lot of time in investigations for these types of compliance situations. So if you are an administrator and you know you're going to have to walk through this type of argument, or you're going to have to be involved in these types of situations, test out the compliance, test out the advanced search, test if you're going to be able to find something like this, because this is sometimes where they can start to fall apart, and you'll see the differences and what sets some backup providers apart from others in these types of cases. All right, and Edward, take us away with the solution.
Yeah, so we've given you a pretty decent checklist, I feel, a pretty good starter checklist, I would say. But of course, the solution I was maybe describing with this checklist, what we cover with all of the bases, I would say, is Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. So we were describing things like infrastructure freedom. We were talking about giving you the ability to control and tier your backups, whether you want to back up multiple times a day with one department or multiple times a minute with another, right? We talked about recovery flexibility and the ability to recover either back to your original location or to another. Recovery at scale, right? So all of these things are very important. All of the things you should add to your checklist. Of course, Veeam covers all of those. I do want to mention that we're also continually innovating. Right, so on top of Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Team Support, of course, now we continue to up the ante here, and we are adding advanced monitoring. So this is, I think, one of the first teasers we're putting out for version 7, because we are starting to come up to it, and we're very excited, as many of our customers are. But this advanced monitoring really is very powerful. It's going to provide an at-a-glance ability to really monitor that Microsoft 365 backup environment, provide alerts so that you can be you can quickly respond to any issues in the system, and of course reports to ensure that you can meet your RPOs and other SLAs for compliance. So there's definitely very powerful tool and something our customers have been waiting for a little while now. Immutable backup copies. This is another big one, right, Corinne? I mean, we came out with backup copies in version 6, and now what are we doing? Why don't you tell us what we're doing there?
So with backup copies, I feel like every time we get on one of these webinars, it's always like an insight to the next set of features that are coming out. As soon as we drop backup copies, it's like, when are you going to make these immutable and lock these down? And now we're going to be releasing these in the next version. And for not just our main cloud providers, but it's pretty much everything that is S3 compatible, which means you can go with like Wasabi, you can do your own in-house locking of these backup copies, and it's going to lock down not just your 3-2-1 rule, but having your artificially air-gapped and locked down secondary copy of your data, creating that security conversation that really needs to happen around this intellectual property source.
Yeah, and I think that might answer a few questions we're getting around 3-2-1 and copy requirements as well. But yeah, really great, powerful features we're excited about releasing actually in the next, by the end of the month, hopefully, fingers crossed.
So let's take a look at that infrastructure that kind of gets built out here from that conversation. So to start off with, the product as a whole backs up Microsoft 365, and we're able to do not just the cloud environment, but take in the on-premises cloud-enabled versions of Microsoft 365 into the same console. So if you're in a hybrid situation working on migrating up to the cloud and you want to have that security in between that migration process, or if you're not quite ready to migrate up, or if you're in between one of those two areas, you don't have to worry about having separate backup products. You can do that from the same area. We cover Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Microsoft Teams, all from the same console. Then you have the flexibility to move that data off to whichever of these repository types that make sense to your business, whether or not you're going to work with some type of local storage that you may already have in place. If you already have an on-premises object storage, we're able to work with that. Or if you're looking to move it off-prem, so maybe a cloud storage, Wasabi, any of the big cloud providers that offer S3 compatible storage or blob storage, as well as anything really cloud native. Then anything that you have chosen that has been S3 compatible, we're able to then copy that off to an additional backup copy to object storage. Currently, it is just low-cost object storage, but we're going to be migrating that to any object storage type with version 7. So any object storage to any object storage, you'll then be able to lock down that secondary copy in that conversation. And anything that is not cold object storage type, you'll be able to perform restorations from that data in case you have any type of corruption that happens on your source data, ransomware, let's have any type of conversation to all of the terrible things that can happen to source data that if you've lived in IT long enough, you know bad things are going to happen, can happen. And then, of course, on top of this entire suite, we have our product coming into the flagship monitoring product, Veeam 1, which is going to give us insights that we haven't actually had in the past into our data that's getting backed up, the type of repositories that we're going to, the number of users being backed up to those repositories. We're going to be in the events calendars inside of Veeam 1 getting released in the version 12. Everything that, if you've worked with backup and replication and Veeam 1 and all of those monitoring goodness that you had with that coffee window that's HTML that you can import into any part of your daily business, you now have full access to your backup cycles and peace of mind that everything is completing as intended. And there's going to be 10 alerts completely free on release integrated into the product. Now we got demos, so I'm going to go ahead and get that up here.
Sounds
Personally,
great.
my
And I
favorite
think,
part.
oh, absolutely. And while we're teeing you up, Corinne, just another reminder, please submit your questions, folks. I noticed we've only got a handful of questions in, so there's a good chance of winning best questions. So please, please, please submit questions that you have. Take it away, Corinne.
Perfect. So hopefully we're able to see my screen here. This is my deployed instance. I have deployed this on the Azure Marketplace, directly from the Azure Marketplace, just to demonstrate can be completely off-prem, in the cloud, cloud native type of solution for you. Now, our primary backup job that I have here, I have it configured with many different types of resources just to kind of demonstrate you can deploy from everything. So from groups to individual users to sites that you can add into the organization. You can even add in your entire organization and scope down to the individual items from the organization to add. So I have a catch-all for all of the teams in my entire organization. So I don't miss when someone creates a new team, but I don't have to worry about catching all the new OneDrives or SharePoint to accidentally blow up all of the data within this particular job. I also have that exclude job that I was speaking about earlier, and the flexibility to run the job when it makes sense to my business, whether or not it's daily. I can run it all the time, all the way down to a 5-minute window. Now, this 5-minute window is essentially continuous. By the time the job's kicked off to run, it's going to start kicking off again to continuously running data to the repository type. Then the backup copies are SLA driven based off of your primary job. So there's no extra thought process that you have to put into putting extra copies of your data or putting a gold copy onto that locked repository type. And I have it here. You can either have it immediately copy, you could have it copy whenever it makes sense to the business, and you can terminate it if you do have an on-prem object storage. Terminate it during windows of business hours, and then it'll just pick up when it's ready to kick off that evening so that you're not worrying about network traffic being eaten if you're sending it off-site. Next thing that we have here is going to be more about the restoration capabilities. Now, the restoration capabilities, we have the 4 explorers, and we can start those off based off the jobs, the entire organizations, or we can do point-in-time restoration. Now, we're going to start these off the current point in time, and I'll go ahead and get each of these explorers up and running for us here so we can have them load in the background. And we'll start off in Exchange. Now, I want to point something out about these explorers. These explorers all kind of have the same look and feel, and we started these from our flagship product, which is actually backup and replication. And we've been perfecting these longer than pretty much anyone's been doing any type of backup of the 365 environment. And I've been perfecting these to kind of be really simple for not just people that are experts in Exchange or SharePoint or any of these specialty applications, but we've made it simple for anyone to get in here. And if you can use a file explorer, I can guarantee you can restore data from any of these applications, because I can click on here and see an email just like I would within a file. And some important features up here at the top, like compare with production. If I did a point-in-time restoration and I went back to a few weeks ago when an email may not have been sent, I can do a point-in-time restoration and see all of the emails that have been changed and compare from then to now and be able to search across those emails so I can do compliance types of search on a very deep and comparative level. Within SharePoint, an additional thing here is, again, I don't have to understand the structure and how SharePoint works in the back end. I was never really good at working with SharePoint personally. I know it's a front end web application. I understood SQL worked with it on the back end, but I know my SharePoint sites never worked quite right. But here inside of the Explorers here, I'm able to search them with content data. I can do any types of advanced search, and I have category searches, so I don't need to know exactly what the names of the fields are in order to get the data I need from those types of fields. Next here is around teams. Now, Edward mentioned some about teams earlier. Teams is a hierarchy of data that is actually abstracted from a lot of back-end applications from Microsoft that's kind of been collaboratively put together into a front-end interface so that it makes it easier for you to communicate back and forth from Microsoft. Now, these all exist on these different data points, but it's kind of hard to chase down where each of these data entities are, and we kind of put it forward for you so you're able to find them from the same point. Now, some of these data entities are hard to find on the repositories, the recycling bins on the background. You can search across all of them from the same window and not have to know if it's the exact name of the file or where the file exists. I'm going to search across all of them here, and I don't even have to know the exact name of that file. And let's see if we can find it here. And we'll start that. And while that search is across there, Edward, do we have any questions?
That is a good question. So yes, we do have a few questions that have come through. So I think one of them related to our solution was pretty interesting. Does the Veeam solution support multiple locations for backup data? We prefer on-prem for speed reasons, but would obviously need to have cloud options for backup to our backup.
Yeah. It's actually an excellent question. We can do a hybrid situation of backing up both on-prem, any amount of users that you would like to back up. And depending on what you would like your on-prem footprint to be, you can back up those users on-prem and then shove any amount of data that you'd like to the cloud off to the cloud. And you can even have different retention types and lengths on your on-prem storage versus your cloud storage. So say you want a 90 days worth of storage on your on-prem environment to kind of keep that footprint down because you may not have a lot of space, and then keep your longer term retention that you may not have to do immediate restore types off of on that longer term low cost object storage.
Okay, we've got a couple other questions here. M365 provides some native backup, and Microsoft would of course recommend that we back up with Azure. Why would using Veeam be more beneficial or economical than backing up natively with Microsoft? So I do know maybe you're referring to Microsoft's upcoming M365 solution. That could be a reference to that. And obviously there are some native capabilities built in to E1 and E5, but ultimately having more control over the data separation, admin privileges, recovery granularity. These are some reasons why Veeam really excels, and really why our customers choose Veeam is they want more control over the data, separate from the Microsoft 365 cloud. So that's ultimately that's one of many reasons why. But I also know that the native M365 solution will have some initial limitations. And of course, we're a Gold Microsoft partner, and they work with us to establish, and help us with our business as well. So ultimately, there's always going to be a space and a case for third-party backup within the Microsoft ecosystem as well.
Just to add to that, we also have all kinds of options and flexibility to who you can send your data to. If you're staying within that same ecosystem and you're using the same credits within that same ecosystem, you're letting that same data entity control the price of that ecosystem. If you have diversity and choices to move data to other storage types, you have someone else to make them honest and keep that price down. So having solutions like Wasabi, which is a big reason and driver, they save costs to giants like Amazon. We see a 1 to 12 savings cost when comparing Amazon to Wasabi storage cost savings. So that is another reason to keep these other data types, especially in the object storage game in the ecosystem.
Good call
Let's
out.
take a look at the self-service portal here. So the self-service portal allows us to do restorations across all of our applications for your own data and be able to delegate restoration capabilities out to other data entities and other users for, say, SharePoint sites that are shared, and in our coming version, Microsoft Teams, so you can go ahead and restore different files and export messages for Teams. So I'm able to see my own data here for, say, my email, so I can restore my own email, helping out with load for like tickets and things like that on the help desk. But since I have this restore operator role, I'm also able to change my scope and come in here and see everyone that's been assigned to my account via my settings in this particular organization to, say, Wanda or Ron and even some of these other sites, and I can change to be able to restore that data. Now, the unique thing about this portal is I don't have any ability to export data from this portal. All I can do is orchestrate restoration processes to get data back to those data entities for those users. So there's no exfiltration of data. Plus, there's no elevated permissions that I need on my account in order to do those restoration processes, or access to those sites in order to do those restoration processes, like site administrator access, which would leave vulnerabilities to those sites that may be unnecessary or additional exfiltration of that data. And that's what I had for the demo here, and we can continue taking questions.
Great. Yeah, no, there's lots of great questions here. It's going to be hard to decide who is the best question here. Alan asks, if I recall from a previous slide, it showed that things that are backed up can work with other products like AWS. If I read that correctly, how do they interact? So maybe we can dive into that a little bit.
So we work with other products like AWS. So I want to clarify, we do have Veeam Backup for AWS, which is a product which does IaaS, PaaS, VCP backup for AWS products, but we also are able to deploy on AWS Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, and you can deploy Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 anywhere and deploy or send any of that data to S3 buckets. So we have a complete relationship with Microsoft and with AWS for being able to send data across these platforms whenever it makes sense for both sides.
Okay, good call out. Before we continue, I will take this one on encryption. Veeam does have encryption capabilities for M365 data at rest in object storage. So that is definitely an option in terms of encrypting and protecting that data, in addition to, of course, built-in MFA and upcoming immutability.
And in transit.
And in transit. So with that, I think we're going to go to the closing portion of this presentation. And look, I just want to present this slide here because, you know, to date, if you know Veeam, if you know our flagship product, you know that we have, you know, 300,000-400,000 customers to date, work with, you know, tens of thousands of, an ecosystem of tens of thousands of service provider partners. This product, Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365, protecting M365 data, 19,000 customers to date, 14 million protected M365 users. Many large and small organizations and enterprises use this. And of course, we've got lots of different awards and accolades and actually reviews. Reviews are something that a lot of our customers are leveraging. and certainly new customers are looking at, we encourage you, if you're interested in Veeam Backup and Microsoft 365 specifically, check out G2 Crowd and check out Trust Radius. Even if you're not interested in Veeam Backup and Microsoft 365, like this is just a great place to like investigate different backup vendors and different software vendors as well. So great place for the admin to hang out and look at different varied raw and unfiltered reviews of different solutions out there. And a couple takeaways which will require you to break out your smartphone and tee up that QR app, right? So we're going to have a few QR scans for you. Get that QR scanner ready because we have the analyst of all analysts, right, Gartner, and their take. Should you back up M365 data? This is a really great report. If you're still on the fence, if you have peers that are on the fence about protecting this data, highly recommend this read. Very informative, great take on their side. And if you're interested more in our solution, check out the #1 guide by Veeam. That is our deep dive on Veeam Backup and Microsoft 365. Provides much more information than what we were able to cover today on the solution components and getting up and running. And lastly, and of course not least, take that free 30-day trial. Completely unlimited capabilities in terms of the solution for 30 days. Once those 30 days are up, you can still keep using the solution, only it's completely free. It'll revert to our community edition. That gives you the option to continue using the product completely free, up to 10 users and a terabyte of SharePoint data, and 10 teams as well, as far as the limitation. So you can still use this for smaller deployments. And with that, I know, Scott, we've covered quite a few of these questions, but if there's any additional questions that we can see from these folks, I think we'll definitely be willing to take them now.
Yeah, great stuff so far. And also do want to mention that if you missed any of those QR codes or just weren't fast enough with your phone, those are all available in the handout section as well. So you can get all three of those resources there. There was a question from Sachin who's asking, can we access once we're out of the country?
So we're able to provide you your data, but you own all of your copies of the data. So wherever you take that data with you, you own your data at that point. That's part of doing the backup in the first place, is gaining the ownership back. So as long as you have access to the repository that has the data, the answer is yes, you'll have access to the data outside of the country.
Okay, super. Hey, another question, maybe for you, Corinne. This one's from Alan, who's wondering, has there been a pattern on when most of the attacks happen? You know, at a certain time of year, a certain time of day? You know, anything you can say about that?
So I want to say there's not really a pattern to a certain time of year or a certain time of day, but there has been sometimes an increase of attacks when they are targeted types of attacks. And they'll happen like on the weekends when they notice there's no activity on your account, especially if they get a hold of a user and they know they're supposed to be off. They can have access to his calendar. Why would they not do it when they know they're supposed to be offline and they can do the most amount of damage? Attacks are getting much more sophisticated in a very scary kind of way, and that's kind of where good monitoring comes into play, which is what we're getting into by getting into our Veeam One product and knowing when maybe your backup is having an increased size overnight is a very good indication that you've had a lot of change data. That's something you need to investigate, and maybe something that you got a bunch of videos uploaded, but it also could be an indication of something malicious, just like high CPU usage.
Okay, super. Edward, this one's maybe for you. It's from Tina. She's wondering, do you have not-for-profit pricing?
That's a great question, actually, Tina. So, if we do actually have special not-for-profit pricing, and that will be negotiable with a salesperson. So, we do certainly offer that, and we just urge that you discuss that one-on-one with one of our sales reps. We'd be happy to offer you and help you in any way we can, pricing wise.
Okay, super. And one more question. This one from Adam, which is also sort of a product question. Adam's wondering if support is needed for a backup or restoration issue. What options do you have, and what's the average wait time?
So we actually have something called our Severity 1 team. And if you have an active license with us, no matter how many licenses that you have, you actually get with our Severity 1 team and they will get back with you. I believe it's a 1-hour SLA if they don't have someone immediately, and work with you until you're able to get that data back, because data missing is a business critical need on our side as well.
All right. Well, tremendous. I think we're probably going to have to leave it there. But Corinne and Edward, and any closing thoughts from either of you? I guess I'll ask Edward first, and then.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Scott. I think that if you're not protecting M365 data yet, I think try to close that gap as soon as possible. Because we're seeing a lot of horror stories out there. There's the market's just rampant with ransomware attacks. So regardless whether you choose Veeam or not, really doesn't matter to me. Well, of course, I'd prefer you choose Veeam, but I prefer that you have some sort of backup protection in place, regardless. That would be my wish for any company is make sure that your data is protected first and foremost.
I'd say looping it back to the technology, we have version 7 coming around the corner here. We're integrating with Veeam 1, which is monitoring. We're introducing immutability, additional features, and I wish I could start talking about what's coming in the next version. I'm super excited, and I look forward to coming back here to talking once it's released out here on the platform and answering the questions and seeing what you guys have ideas about what we should be doing next.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to hearing from you at that point too. So thank you both for coming on today. This has been really, really informative. Lots of stuff, great stuff currently, great stuff to look forward to. Thanks again.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks all.
And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business, which is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Michael Munns from Texas. So congratulations to Michael. We'll be in touch about getting you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Veeam for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for all of your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a great rest of your day.